Only in Kentucky can a politician wait for the governor to leave the state so she can hijack the government, and a community print warning shirts about a werewolf. Hi, I'm Michael, and I'm learning a little bit more about Kentucky, one county at a time, all 120 of them. And today I'm learning about Shelby County. The physical foundation of Shelby County is built on limestone. Water has spent millions of years dissolving this limestone beneath the surface, creating a karst landscape filled with sinkholes and hidden channels, like a lot of places in Kentucky. Above ground, the terrain shifts from rolling plateaus down into the stream valleys carved by Gist Creek and Brashears Creek. Rising above all of this is Jephthah Knob. At an elevation of a little under 1,200 feet, it's the highest point in the Louisville area market. Today, Shelby County is home to over 52,000 people. Long before anybody grew county lines, these valleys were home to others. Archaeologists digging near Clear Creek at sites known as Shelby Lake and Old Bear found stone tools, ceramics, and animal bones that prove populations used this land during the late woodland period. By the time the frontier era began, there were no permanent tribal towns left inside the modern county borders anymore. European settlement officially started in 1780. Squire Boone, the youngest brother of Daniel Boone, established Painted Stone Station on Clear Creek. It was the first real settlement in the area. But the frontier was volatile. In 1781, native forces attacked the station, forcing the settlers to abandon the fort and retreat towards the safety of Louisville. They were ambushed along the way in an event that became known as the Long Run Massacre. Boone survived, and he returned 2 years later to rebuild his mill. After the Revolutionary War, the Virginia legislature began granting land to veterans, opening the territory to a flood of new arrivals. In June of 1792, the state officially carved Shelby County out of Jefferson County. They named it for Colonel Isaac Shelby, a military leader who commanded troops at the Battle of Kings Mountain and served as Kentucky's first governor. To get the county seat of Shelbyville off the ground, a local landowner named William Shannon surrendered 50 acres of his property, specifically donating 1 acre for public buildings. The town trustees wanted to ensure permanent growth, so they required all new residents to construct a cabin with a stone chimney. And the rule worked. By 1800, Shelbyville was home to 262 residents. As the county grew, other communities formed around agriculture and the expanding railroads. Simpsonville, incorporated in 1833, was named for Captain John Simpson, a War of 1812 veteran. Finchville took its name from an early blacksmith named Leadwell Finch, just as the community of Cropper was named for its own local blacksmith, James Cropper. Other towns have origin stories that are a bit more colorful. In the northern part of the county, a group of Dutch families bought 10,000 acres from Squire Boone. They managed the land communally under a man named Abraham Banta, and the settlement was initially called Bantatown. Today, we know it as Pleasureville, partially in Henry County as well. Local lore claims the name changed after a politician named Major Joe LeCompte passed through, heard women singing and men whistling, and declared it a place of absolute pleasure. Other folks will tell you that maybe the name came from a local brothel operating right next to the post office. When the Louisville and Nashville Railroad laid tracks a mile to the south in 1858, the town physically split into a north town and a south town. Baghdad is another town with competing legends. It grew around a rural intersection, and some stories claim it was named after a vibrant railroad worker known as Daddy's Bag. Another popular story insists that the name came from a feed merchant's son who had a speech impediment. Whenever a customer entered the store, the boy would yell, "Bag, Dad," to his father, supposedly. Whatever they named their towns, the early residents built their legacy in brick and stone. For example, the Van B. Snook House near Cropper. It looks like a pristine 1820s mansion, but it's best known in local lore as the site of the infamous Snook Hare wedding tragedy. During a reception there, 65 guests fell ill from poisoned food, and 7 people died. Or look at the Bird family legacy. Philemon Bird built a massive home in 1850 known as the Bird's Nest. He later gave 100 acres to his son Henry, who decided to build something entirely unique. In 1880, Henry built the Bird Octagonal Mule Barn. It housed 40 mules that fed from a massive central bin, and it remains the only recorded octagonal barn in the county. Beyond these rural estates, education became a central pillar for Shelby County pretty early on. The Shelbyville Academy was established in 1798. It evolved into Shelby College in 1836, and affiliated with the Episcopal Church before eventually closing in 1871. Another educational powerhouse was founded by Julia Tevis In 1825, she opened the Science Hill Female Academy. She completely defied the social norms of the 1800s by teaching her female students mathematics, history, and science, operating on the firm belief that women could master these subjects just as easily as men. Weird. Crazy. Funded early on by the Methodist Church, the Academy survived the Civil War and operated continuously until the Great Depression forced its closure in 1939. It holds the record as the oldest Protestant female academy to operate continuously in the U.S. Decades later, restaurateur Tim Barnes and chef Donna Gill turned the old dining room into the iconic Science Hill Inn, while the chapel was renovated into the Wakefield Scarce Antique Gallery. That educational progress happened against the backdrop of a deeply divided county. Shelby County relied heavily on enslaved labor to build its economy, focusing on hemp, tobacco, pork, and beef. When the Civil War erupted, the local population fractured. Men from Shelby County joined both the Union and Confederate armies. The war came directly to the streets of Shelbyville in August of 1864. Confederate guerrillas led by Captain Dave Martin attacked the Shelby County courthouse, hoping to seize a cache of muskets. They were met by a local merchant named Thomas McGarth and a tailor, J.H. Masonheimer, who grabbed their own weapons and fought the raiders off, killing 3 of them in the process. Captain Martin missed the gunfight entirely. He was trapped behind the courthouse because the local jailer's wife had stepped outside and began viciously scolding him for endangering the townspeople there. To regain control, the Union Army hired Captain Edward Terrell and a local home guard to hunt down Confederate raiders. The Shelbyville town trustees actually paid Terrell's hotel bills just to keep his men nearby. In May of 1865, he proved his worth by tracking down the infamous guerrilla leader William Clark Quantrill in neighboring Spencer County and fatally shooting him. But he quickly turned outlaw himself. He murdered an Illinois stock merchant named William Johnson. And after breaking out of jail, he returned to Shelbyville and brazenly went drinking in the local saloons. Town Marshal George Kaplinger had enough. He organized a posse and ambushed him outside the Armstrong Hotel, shooting him in the spine. He died from his wound while his lieutenant, Harry Thompson, broke out of jail and fled to Texas, living out the rest of his days under the alias Henry Grayson. An even darker tragedy struck Simpsonville earlier that year. In January of 1865, 80 soldiers from the 5th United States Colored Cavalry were driving a herd of cattle towards a market in Louisville. They set up camp in Simpsonville for the night. Confederate guerrillas, led by Henry Magruder, ambushed the camp from the rear. They murdered 22 black Union soldiers and wounded 20 more. Witnesses reported that some of the soldiers were gunned down while actively attempting to surrender. The guerrillas suffered 0 casualties and rode away. The Union Army station in Louisville ignored the attack for 3 days, leaving local citizens to care for the wounded. The town buried the murdered soldiers in unmarked mass graves. Today are actively searching the ground along US 60 to finally locate those graves and give the men a proper memorial. Magruder was later captured, tried by a military tribunal for other murders, and executed in Louisville. Racial violence and systemic division continued long after the war. The Kentucky legislature passed the Day Law of 1904. It mandated strict segregation in all public and private schools in the state. Berea College, in Berea, was forced to expel its entire population of black students. In response, the Berea trustees purchased 444 acres in Shelby County and built the Lincoln Institute in 1912. It operated as a premier boarding school for black students. The students worked the massive acreage to produce the food required to run the campus, just like they did at Berea College. Whitney M. Young Sr. served as the first black president of the institute. His son, Whitney M. Young Jr., was born on the campus in 1921. He grew up to lead the National Urban League, advising multiple U.S. presidents and helping organize the historic 1963 March on Washington. The Lincoln Institute eventually closed in 1966 after integration reduced the need for segregated academies, and the campus transitioned into the Job Corps Training Center. The black community there also anchored itself through faith and political involvement. In 1896, the St. John United Methodist Church was built on College Street in Shelbyville. The congregation acquired the land from David Wayne. Prominent members included Zora Clark, the first African-American in the county to earn a nursing degree, and T.S. Baxter, the first African-American elected to the Shelbyville City Council. Over in Simpsonville, the Simpsonville Christian Church was built in 1875. Historical records indicate the church was constructed directly on the site of a former slave market, reclaiming a space of trauma for the community. As the county moved into the 20th century, its economy evolved alongside its infrastructure. The Louisville and Frankfort Railroad had been built through the territory back in 1850. The Shelby Railroad was chartered the following year to connect Shelbyville to the main line at Anchorage and operated independently until the massive Louisville and Nashville network purchased it in 1902. This rail access allowed small towns like Waddy to experience a massive boom. The Southern Railway built a siding there to stage rail cars, and today the Norfolk Southern Railroad operates a siding in Waddy that stretches over 2 miles long. Towns also had to adapt to this growth out of pure necessity, and in the early 1950s the community of Finchville realized they desperately needed a safe public water supply. A local civil engineer named Robert Doyle took matters into his own hands. He dug a lake on his farm and built a small water treatment plant. Neighbors came together to dig trenches and lay distribution lines. Doyle ran this private utility for 30 houses until the Shelbyville Municipal Water and Sewer Commission finally stepped in and laid a permanent pipeline from the city in 1978. Just south of 64, the town of Waddy became the center of a bizarre livestock panic in 2013. Over a tense 5-month span, an unknown predator began slaughtering cattle along Ditto Road. Calves and bulls were found dead and mutilated. The strange part was that the predator never actually ate the animals. It was killing entirely for sport. And so panic spread, and residents actually began printing t-shirts warning their neighbors about the Waddy werewolf. In an interview, local farmer Kevin Cox described the carnage to reporters, explaining how he went out to feed his calves only to find one of his bulls covered in blood, with its face torn off and its ears completely ripped away. Shelby County Animal Control was baffled. They eventually swabbed the wounds and sent saliva samples to a specialized laboratory in California. And when the DNA results came back, it proved the predator wasn't a wolf, it wasn't a coyote or some monster. It was just a highly aggressive, domesticated dog. The county is also famous for producing some of Kentucky's most ruthless and effective female political leaders. Martha Lane Collins, born in Baghdad, navigated the male-dominated political machine to serve as the first and so far only female governor of Kentucky from 1983 to 1987. But Thelma Stovall truly mastered the political system. Because the state constitution strictly forbade officials from serving consecutive terms in the same office, Stovall spent 2 decades playing musical chairs, swapping back and forth between Secretary of State and State Treasurer. In 1975, she broke the glass ceiling and became the first woman elected lieutenant governor of Kentucky. The law at the time stated that whenever the governor crossed the state line, the lieutenant governor assumed full executive power. Stovall used this loophole aggressively and unapologetically. While the governor was traveling out of state, she stepped in and pardoned 3 prisoners, including a man serving a life sentence for stealing $28. During another trip, she vetoed the legislature's attempt to repeal the Equal Rights Amendment. She even went so far as to call a special session of the General Assembly while the governor was away to force through tax cut legislation. Today, Shelby County balances its deep historical traditions with massive industrial expansion, all while maintaining a very distinct aesthetic. If you drive down US 60, you'll see exactly why it holds the title of the American saddlebred capital of the world. The landscape is dominated by multi-million-dollar equine estates, framed by endless miles of black 4-board fences. More than 90 active horse farms operate right here in the county. If you're hungry, you can grab a meal at the Claudia Sanders Dinner House in Shelbyville. Colonel Sanders actually lived in Shelbyville from 1960 until he died in 1980, and the restaurant he and his wife opened remains a local landmark. But Shelby County isn't just a museum to fried chicken and pioneer forts. It's also where Jack Harlow spent his early years, proving that the county's cultural footprint extends far beyond history books and horse farms. That culture is supported by an economy in which the manufacturing sector dominates. Automotive suppliers employ thousands of residents. And in 2024, Canadian Solar announced a staggering $712 million investment to build a Shelbyville battery manufacturing plant, a project expected to create over 1,500 high-tech jobs. So, that's Shelby County. What did I get wrong this time?